Hey guys, I'm learning TFT, back with another video where I'm going to go over the 14.23c early best units and boards to put together. And the thought process behind these videos is for me to share my learning process so that I can learn the material better and that you can benefit from the learnings as well. I apologize that I haven't created some videos in a while. I was out on vacation for the last week for Thanksgiving break with my family, and we went on a Disney cruise and I got sick, so I'm going to be sipping a lot of water. My throat's a little sore. I have cough drops, so forgive me for sounding a little bit off. I also have a mug here that my kids got me with some Pengu, and this is Daddy's TFT, the pun there, for my kids. So in this video, I'm going to kind of go through best AP/AD melee packs of units, so with some statistics to back them, and then unit tiers based off of these packs. And this data is put together based off of, this is Meta TFT's early comp statistics, and it does a breakdown of what they best transition to, what items, and additional units. Before I get into the results though, I want to talk about kind of the importance of the early game, borrowing from chess. Some chess quotes from pretty famous chess players. So Bobby Fischer said, "By the time the opening is over, you should already know your middle game plan." And so when I go into some of these lines, or these packs that I call them, packs of units for the early game, I'm also talking about how you can transition into the mid game. So 2-cost, 3-cost units, as well as what late game units you can transition them into. So borrowing from Bobby Fischer from that sense. And then, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, Lajos Portish said that the purpose of the opening is not to win the game, but to create a playable middle game. And finally, Rudolf Spielman said, "Play the opening like a book, the middle game like a magician, and the end game like a machine." And when he says playing the opening like a book, a lot of that is because, similar to chess, the early game is pretty straightforward. There are far fewer variables than there are in the middle to late game. And there's a lot of data you can look at to see what kind of the strongest openers are. And so that's kind of the thought process behind the analysis that I put together here. This is updated on December 12th for Diamond Plus. And the statistics on the right side of each of these shows the win rate percentage, final placement to the game, and the play rate. So win rate percentage is the win rate in stage 2. So for example, this pack of units has a 44% win rate in stage 2, but averages a 4.1 final placement. So this can give us an indicator when you look at the win rate to final placement, as far as like this board, you aren't really expecting to win. So you might actually sacrifice some of the early game in order to get better items and position yourself to be stronger in stage 3. So I'm going to go through each of these boards and talk about how they work. So the first board is Darius, Morgana, Rel, and Vladimir. This, by the way, for AP, you're pretty much playing with rods and tiers. AD, you're going to play with swords, glove, and melee is going to be mostly gloves, but really depends on who you're carrying. So this board here can transition into Black Rose AP Flex, as well as 6 Sentinel Heimer, because you're already playing the Visionary and Sentinel here with Rel and Morgana. So you can really flex between these two. Black Rose AP Flex is just 5 Black Rose, usually carrying Heimer in the back line. So either way, you're transitioning this into Heimer, which means typically BIS Heimer is going to be blue buff, but if you are going to do Black Rose AP Flex, then you can also slam Shojin. A lot of times you just want to preserve HP, because if you want to be able to play Black Rose AP Flex, you need a lot of gold and to preserve HP. So greeting blue buff isn't necessarily always going to be the strongest play. So here I have the units that on top here that can kind of connect into the units on bottom. The best board to transition to once you get to Cassiopeia is to just put in 3 black rows. So this can be put in level 5, and then you can add in Blitzcrank or Ziggs to be able to make Cassiopeia stronger once you get her to 2 stars. Morgana 2 is going to be stronger usually than Cassiopeia 1. You can also play 4 Watcher here, since you already have Darius. Darius and Rel also give you Conqueror, which works out well. And you can also go down a vertical of 4 Visionary if you are able to get any of these units. And this probably has the highest, just the strongest start in the game. The downside is you're going to need 2 costs here, but it averages a 3.9 final placement. Next we have Amumu, Darius, Lux, and Zyra. And you'll see that Lux and Zyra actually appear multiple times with varying front lines. So we have Aurelia Singed frontline instead of Amumu Darius, as well as Steb Trundle. So basically a Bruiser frontline, a Sentinel frontline, and a Warden frontline. The reason the Warden frontline performs the best is because it naturally transitions into Vladimir. Once you find Vladimir, then you can play into Black Rose AP Flex. You can also go into 8 Sork, though that doesn't perform as well. And you can go into Nami Swain for Emissary reroll as well. But if you're able to get a Lux 2 or a Zyra 2 in the early game, that can be really strong. Lux gives a ton of value per mana. Her shield and her single target is very strong. Zyra also has a lot of single target. So even if you're not necessarily winning, which a lot of times you can do if you're able to 2-star these and get 1 2-star frontline, at the very least, if you have a 2-star backline, Lux or Zyra, you can pretty reliably kill units, so you're not going to be taking horrible losses. As far as transition plan goes, because you already have the Warden, you can get 4 Warden here. You can also go down a Conqueror, 4 Conqueror route if you're able to add in Swain in the mid game, and then of course you can play down the Black Rose line. We have Aurelia Morgana Singed Vex. So this is a Sentinel frontline with a Visionary backline, which transitions again into, a lot of these AP are going to transition into Black Rose AP Flex. Because you're starting off with the 2 Sentinel, you can also go into 6 Sentinel Heimer. And because you have the Aurelia and Vex, this can also transition naturally into 7 Rebel, where you're going to carry your Zoe 4 cost in the late game and tank your Alawi, who is also a Sentinel in the late game. As far as kind of units to add, you can really easily add a Rel here, and then you can get 4 Visionary with Renata plus these 2. These are more Sentinels. These are both Nunu and Renata are Visionaries. And then you can kind of also flex Bruiser or Warden instead of the Sentinels, though those are not as strong because Rel is a Sentinel, so it just kind of more naturally gives you more options. And then if you do build down the Warden line, then you can always add in Vladimir Cassiopeia with the Morgana to go to Black Rose. Alternatively, you can add in the Rebel units to get 3 Rebel. And if you are able to get 3 Rebel in, then you probably want to carry the Vex instead of the Morgana. Of course, you probably just put the AP items on whoever you 2-star first. And this gives you, this opener gives you a lot of viable late game transitions that some of the other openers don't. Especially because Heimer is so contested. Having this Rebel out, if nobody else is going down that line, can be pretty solid and give you a lot more options. So those are the S tier. I sorted these by final average placement. So 3.9, 4.1, 4.1. I put basically anything less than 4.2 in the S tier for average placement, and the A tier is 4.2 to like 4.3, and then B tier 4.4 or above. So next we have Aurelia, Vex, Rel, and Set. This can also similarly play into 7 Rebel, just like the last board we saw, as well as Black Rose AP Flex. You can pretty easily add in more Sentinels, more Rebels, and add in like a Bruiser as well. So the way that you build up this board is pretty straightforward. Now we have the Aurelia, Lux, Singe, Zyra. So your sorcerers backline with your Sentinels frontline. This can also build into 7 Rebel down this path, but not as naturally as this other Morgana Vex backline, because you already have 2 Rebels there. But that's possible. You can build it into Heimer since you're already building kind of a Sentinel frontline and Academy here with Lux. So once you add in the Leona, and you can get an Academy, especially if you have good Academy items. So one trick you can do is pull up the team planner at the start of the game. Click a Academy unit to see, and then hover over the trait in the team planner to see what the Academy items are. And if the Academy item is good for Heimer, then it's like a Static Shiv or a JG or Archangel. Those are all pretty solid for you to potentially go towards a 6 Sentinel Heimer direction. And then, of course, anytime you play AP, you can play into Black Rose AP Flex. Which, by the way, my last video with my first coaching session with Marcel P had a pretty detailed breakdown of how to play Black Rose AP Flex. And you can pretty easily transition into that from any of the sorcerer lines, since the moment you add in Vladimir, you can add in Swain for 4 Sork, but once you have Vladimir, you can pretty easily, once you have your 3 Black Rose, add in the Black Rose units, get Scion, and that gives you a lot of frontline. I won't go into too much detail in the B tier lines. It's pretty similar. You're playing around Vex backline. You can go into 7 Rebel or Akali Nocturne reroll. I haven't really seen this be very successful. The items are going to be a little bit different. And then you can do a Bruiser frontline with the sorcerers. But the transition is just kind of awkward. You're really only playing the Bruisers for a little bit until you want to go into Black Rose or Nami Swain reroll. So it's fine, like if you happen to hit these and Lux too, to hold you over, but you're kind of losing out on some econ, and you usually want to get out Bruiser later anyway. We'll see later that the best Bruiser line is played down the sniper tree, since you want to eventually build into Twitch. Although Twitch usually is I think it's like S or S plus if you have a Bruiser emblem that you can put on Dr. Mundo. But otherwise it's kind of like an A tier build. So that covers the AP lines. Next we have the AD line, which, like we just talked about, is Steb Trundle and Zeri Maddie. The default line is to play like these items for Twitch, and red buff would be really good. I just threw in Maddie, the Gunblade Archangel here, because it's also possible that you could go towards Kog'Maw. Although Kog'Maw doesn't want the Bruiser frontline, Kog'Maw wants the Warden or the Watcher frontline. But if you happen to have a Rage Blade, and let's say you hit a good artifact for Kog'Maw, like Lichbane, I forget off the top of my head, Gambler's Blade. There are a bunch of good artifacts for Kog'Maw that if you happen to have this start and you hit a Kog'Maw early, you already have a Rage Blade, you can transition into Kog'Maw if you're uncontested and if you're like ahead of lobby tempo. Let's say you 5-streak from this board, then you might be able to play into Kog'Maw. But most likely you're going to default into 6 Bruiser Twitch from this board. And alternatively, you can go into Camille reroll, which is awkward since why would you be playing Maddie and Zeri? And it's hard to like kind of itemize them and then transition into Camille. But the reason it's a natural transition is because you already have the enforcers and you can have a front line for Camille. So that's not very common, but just an out that I wanted to highlight. In B tier for AD openers is the scrap line. So similar with the bruiser front line. And if you happen to hit a powder 2 early, then you can just slam AD items on powder, or you could just scrap the sword or glove. Ideally, what would be better is if you hit an early gangplank out of an orb to play around gangplank to hold the quirky items eventually. But scrap got a pretty hard nerf in this opening patch, so this line isn't that great. And so I'd really only play this if you happen to have exact quirky items, plus you hit a bunch of 2 stars and you might be able to streak and stay ahead of tempo. Alternatively, you can build this into Camille reroll since you already have the Steb and the powder. And because you have the bruiser frontline, you can also go into Twitch like we talked about. And so Gangplank can be your mid-game item holder, or if you hit the Gangplank out of the orb. But typically, this opener is not going to be as strong as some of the other ones. The other thing you'll notice here is that there are way more AP openers than there are AD openers. And a big reason for that is that at the 1 cost level, there's only Draven and Maddie as 1 cost backliners, whereas there's, I believe, like 6 AP backliners for AP units. And so that's why there's just going to be a lot more openers that are viable for AP compared to AD. Next we have melee. So this melee opener, if you can get a Camille, it can be quite strong. Her bis is double Hodge and Titans, but I just put BT here just so that you kind of are aware that's still viable. And you eventually just add in more ambushers. If you get another bruiser, you can throw in another bruiser. You can get 4 bruiser in here as well. If you get Loris, you can throw in 4 enforcers. If you get, who's the other enforcer? Maddie as well as an option. So this line's pretty straightforward. And then we have the Violet family reroll opener, which has probably the highest play rate out of all of the comps opening packs listed here. You want a lot of gloves for Violet, and this is, if you're not familiar with it, it's family reroll, and you throw in powder, and eventually you want to 3-star Violet primarily, get to the anomaly round with about 60 gold. I think there are some anomalies that are not possible to appear if you have this board. So I think it might be something like 56 gold is the absolute minimum. But then you roll for Ultimate Hero, the anomaly where you convert a 3-star 1 cost into a 4-star. Alternate transitions, you can, since you most likely are playing this line if you have melee items, if you find that you're contested and you hit some Camille's early, since you're already playing powder, you could transition into a Camille reroll if you're contested. Or if you hit these Conqueror units early and a Darius 2 early, you could also move the melee items over to Darius and use that to tempo and eventually move the melee items over to Ambessa or Vi. And this line, the 6 Conqueror line, you really only want to play if you are win streaking to stay ahead of lobby tempo. It's similar to Sugar Craft from set 12, where you want to stay ahead of tempo and use all of the rewards from the loot chests to be able to get an advantage on the lobby. So that covers all of the the unit packs. And based off of all of these, I put together unit tiers. It's kind of hard to, okay, so this is Lux in the upper left. Sorry that this doesn't appear perfectly. But I put together these unit tiers based off of what appears most commonly, like in the S tier, and the ones that don't appear as common lower. So this would reflect what you want to hold in stage 1 and stage 2. Of course, what you want to hold depends on what item components you have. So if you have like a bunch of gloves, sword, no tears and rods, you probably don't want to hold Lux and Zyra. So if you have like the melee components, then Violet would be great. So this is kind of S tier, A tier. A lot of these repeat across, many of these. So Aurelia is in a bunch of A tier. Morgana, Darius are over here. Morgana. So that's kind of how I put this list together. And then in the 2 cost, we have Vladimir, Rel appear a lot over here. And Rel is very flexible across a lot of different lines. Since you can get the Visionary and the Sentinel. So you can get the Sentinel here, pairs well with Aurelia and Vex. Vladimir, of course, is Black Rose and Sorcerer, and Sorcerer is very strong opener. Black Rose transitions with Morgana and Zyra Lux really well. And then Camille at the 2 cost reroll level is just the best 2 cost. Vander here is a close, if you have Violet, a bunch of Violets and Violet items, then Vander is basically S tier. Since if you find an early Vander and get 3 family together, you can most likely streak stage 2 if you have a Violet 2. So that can be really strong. And then Set is quite flexible if you have the Rebel opener. Zeri mainly if you're going down this Steb, Trundle, Maddie line, or Kog'Maw. And then Leona is flexible if you can play an early Academy with Lux and Ezreal. Also scales pretty well with Sentinel. If you hit Aurelia, Singed, Rel. So Sentinel early game is just quite strong, especially since few people have Shred and it gives you a lot of armor and magic resist. And then most of these other 2 costs there's just not much to write home about, and not too strong in the meta right now. Though there is an Urgot, I think it's like Hunger to Power, where you eat the set 3 reroll going around, but I don't think it really performs very well and is mostly playable under very narrow conditions. All right, so that covers all of the 1423C early analysis. I hope you found this video helpful. I would love to hear your thoughts on the contents of this video, what has been working for you, what hasn't been working for you, maybe any analysis that you disagree with. I would love to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one.